right? The guys who are competing today on average are better athletes than they were 5 years ago and 5 years before that and 5 years before that, measurably so. If you look at the guys who are competing and how they move and how much there's more money involved, there's just, overall everything, better training partners, more progressive training. So what's happening is we're watching the sport evolve. Isn't there going to kind of be a breaking point where the guys are so athletic and so good and they've become so good that isn't it more dangerous for the fighters? Like I'm saying, technically the guy today, you today with your bare hands are more of a dangerous person than fucking Scott Ferozzo was back in UFC 2 or whatever it was. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. Well, absolutely, 100%. I see where you're going with this. We're capable of inflicting more damage, and therefore it's more dangerous.
Think about the future.
Of course, and I completely agree. Also, what you got to remember is that these days, now, of course, we still have our specialists, our true specialists, in terms of style of martial arts. We have your Damian Maia and people like that will get you to the ground and will look to choke you out or submit you or whatever it is. But now I'm going to go out on a limb here. I've done absolutely no research other than the fact that I'm involved with the UFC very, very heavily. But I would say there's way more stand-up going on these days in mixed martial arts than what there used to be. People are learning how to stop the takedowns. People know how to get back to the feet. And people know how to defend submissions. So really, for the most part, I mean, you still see it now and again, but you don't see laying praying as much, where one guy just lies on top of the other one and just does these pitter-patter punches. For the most part, good fights are happening on the feet, a lot of action, a lot of headshots, a lot of kicking, a lot of knees, a lot of elbows, and it's all on the feet. I don't know. Would you agree with that, Lewis?
I would agree with that, and I think it's because, right now, and we've seen it happen, we've talked about it before on the show, but guys like John Fitch, Yushin Okami, these lay and pray experts that were, making really exciting fighters look bad and getting, 8, 9, 10 wins in a row. As soon as they lost, the UFC was like, get the fuck out of here. You're making all of our exciting fighters look really, really bad, and they're demanding a super high paycheck. Somebody like John Fitch, who had been with the company forever, they're paying him a lot of money to kill exciting contenders. Well,
GSP is the classic example. I mean, that kind of was his style. I mean, don't get me wrong, GSP came into the UFC as a remarkable kickboxer, Shotokan karate athlete and fighter, pardon me. And, very, very good. But he did develop that wrestling style, kind of a lay and pray. But listen, more power to him. You want to go in there, you want to win your fights and take as little damage as possible. But I think now, certainly, you're not seeing, listen, back when the UFC first started, no one had seen a fucking armbar before, unless people involved in those martial arts. Now everybody knows. Now everybody's wise. So that's why you're seeing less submissions. The takedowns, again, I'm not a wrestler, but I know how to stop takedowns. Generally, people work their takedown defense just as much as they work their offensive wrestling, especially if your style is that of a striker. If you've got no intention of trying to take a guy down, then you're just going to work your takedown defense. You bring some wrestlers in, and it's a lot easier to try and defend the takedown than what it is to try and get one. So therefore, fights are panning out on the feet much, much more, and you're absolutely fucking right. This is a very, very somber episode, but still rightly so. I mean, there was a death from one of the UFC brothers at the weekend, and as I say, thoughts are with his family. It's interesting, that you called that a mismatch, though, Lewis, because
they were calling it a mismatch. The media was calling it a mismatch.
Listen, I'm not jumping on that. I'm not giving you a hard time. What I'm saying is, though, all right, you said the word mismatch there, and they had, different boxing records, but and I know we said we weren't going to talk about this because everything that I say gets fucking turned into clickbait and a negative headline put on it. But you want to talk about fucking mismatches, possibly, you fucking asshole internet websites, possibly a 49-0 best boxer in the world taking on a guy that's never boxed before, ever. I mean, how's that sound?
Yeah. I mean, look, that is maybe the biggest.
You want to talk about mismatch? I'm not saying that's a mismatch because he's not. Connor's an amazing fighter, but you just said those words. Mismatch because and the stories online are alluding to the fact that maybe this guy was out of his depth in terms of boxing ability. Well, the big news right now is Conor versus Floyd. It's hard not to make a comparison there.
Of course. And also you're talking about, that guy's a dude who's 7-1, just some dude, and Tim Hague, who's like, a fairly accomplished fighter. the discrepancy, the difference between them is much greater, in my opinion. You know, Conor McGregor, look, I think Conor's great, and we are all praying to God that he can knock, Money Mayweather's head off and, prove that MMA fighters are the toughest fighters in the world and fuck boxing and blah, blah, blah. But there's a huge, huge discrepancy, and you wonder how they were even able to make this fight happen. I mean, that's kind of crazy. I mean, there are commissions in place specifically for this reason, no?
Yeah, of course there is. I mean, at the end of the day, Conor is a professional fighter. He's a very, very well-proven professional fighter. Not only can he talk the talk, but he walks the walk very well. We all know this. He managed to capture 2 divisions in the UFC at the same time. So, saying, mismatch, whatever, it just kind of caught my imagination when you said that. So, and of course, money talks. It's going to be a big, big money fight, so that sways commissions as well. But one thing that my boxing coach, Jason Prillo, said, we were talking about this last week, and he said something that was very interesting, because I was actually buying into the Conor hype. I was like, listen, at the end of the day, when I'm sparring somebody, I like them to spar me, box me, strike me, kickbox, whatever, the way it's supposed to be done. You know what I mean? So if I'm going against a good guy that's polished, that's trained for a while, I'll do really good. But then you might get some guy in that is kind of a beginner, but he's game and he wants to have a go. And you're like, yeah, sure, we'll do a couple of rounds. And he's catching me with all this fucking stupid stuff. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You're just spazzing out. And he's like, yeah, well, but I caught you, didn't I? So it's because he's so unorthodox in his movement. So I was kind of thinking, well, maybe that might work for Conor versus Floyd, because Conor will move differently than Floyd's expecting him to. He won't follow the rules, if you will, in terms of boxing. Right. He won't necessarily move exactly like a boxer, so you never know. He might land that big shot because Conor can land the big shot. And my coach, Perillo, said, listen, and he's absolutely right here, boxers hit harder than MMA guys. And I'm not saying that to disparage MMA guys. That's all they fucking do. Whereas an MMA guy goes out there, we've got to learn our wrestling, we've got to learn our jiu-jitsu, we've got to learn our kicks, we've got to learn getting back to our feet, we've got to do our sprints, we've got to do our submission defense, we've got to knees, elbows, we've got to do all these things, many, many things, mixed martial arts. That's what makes the sport so beautiful, But it's hard to be a fucking true master, absolute supreme, world-class specialist in every one of them. You can't do it. Simply can't do it. Boxers, generally, all they do, well, not generally, all they do is from an early age, and a lot of them start at 4, 5, 6, whatever, they just master punching people in the fucking face, right? And they can punch like no one else. Jason Perillo is a skinny little dude. No offense, Jay, if you're listening. That motherfucker can hit a bag like you wouldn't believe. You want to see the punch that motherfucker can throw. It's crazy, and he's only a little dude. I've seen him knock out a guy, this 6'6" dude, one night. Boom, put him to sleep. Boom, and laid him out. I was like, holy shit, that was a good shot. Anyway, my point is these boxers can fucking throw. And he said, you don't think Canelo can punch? You don't think he said, Canelo will fucking knock Conor's head clean off his shoulders. And he said, and he couldn't land on Mayweather. So what do you think Conor's going to do?
Yeah.
And I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and Perillo's a dude who I love talking to Jason. We got to get him on the podcast sometime.
We got to do it 100%.
When I'm in LA, I'm going to LA maybe in July, definitely August. Maybe I'll come in July, but we should do it with Perillo because he's such a fucking interesting guy, and his perspective on fighting is so great and brilliant and so insightful. But I could just listen to him talk about boxing for hours. Oh. And if he's saying that, I really, really believe it. Obviously, people talk about a puncher's chance. I've been hearing things about like Floyd now, and I don't know shit about boxing. So I know all the fans are going to tear me a new one and be like, this guy's a fucking idiot. But you hear things about Floyd being able to like switch up styles in the middle of the fight and like completely like shift the way that he's fighting. And it's like a guy that's that good who's been able to beat 49 people and really embarrass almost everybody. For Conor to jump into it, look, it's admirable, but at the same time, I see Floyd actually stopping Conor McGregor probably pretty early in the fight, 4th, 5th round. I mean, how do you deal with the speed? And also, Conor's going to be so much bigger than him as well. People are like, oh, well, Floyd's never dealt with that size. I don't think that fucking matters. I think it's going to slow Conor down. I think Floyd's going to really make an example out of Conor.
Yeah, well, they're doing the fight at 154 pounds, so that kind of suits Conor. And everyone's saying that that's, a disadvantage for Floyd. But who knows? Maybe Floyd's like, yeah, I'm cool with that, man. Fucking makes it easy for me. I'm getting older. It's hard for me to make 147 pounds.